Hello, it's good to be with you, and I'm glad that you're here to join us for our second section of the book, Human Shaped Learning. This section deals with chapters 4 through 6 and a general theme of from silence to significance. As we begin to look at some of the themes that showed up in these chapters, one of them is something similar to earlier chapters where we talked a lot about relational learning. In this case, relational learning being at the core of education. One of the things that I think is really important for us to remember when we're thinking about relational learning is that it's not only for us with our students, it's also for us with our colleagues. I really feel like that is something that maybe gets neglected a little bit in schools. So often we are so focused on making sure we're providing just what our students need or taking care of what's going on in our classrooms that it's hard to remember or make time for the important relational piece with our colleagues. And that can really enhance not only our ability to do our job well, but also just our enjoyment of our work. Having other adults around that you can bounce ideas off of and be in good relationship with is just a really valuable part of education.
Mm.
The other thing I would say is that as we get into those more authentic relationships, especially when we're working with our students, being in that kind of settled relationship, I think helps to fuel their curiosity, your students' creativity, and really creates that sense of community within your classroom.
Yeah, one of the things that occurred to me with this, because we talk about silence later in the book as a very positive thing. The silence I think that we're talking about here, I think it comes up in one of the poems, is not the silence of significance. It's the silence of I don't know what to say. I don't know. I'm going to screw it up. I don't know what they want from me. And there's that silence. Or among my colleagues, the silence because I don't know that guy. I just don't. I don't know what he's doing. I don't know what I'm doing. I just want him to think that I'm doing my job. And those all come out of that, insecurity or fear, something other certainly than trust or relationship. And trust is the thing that is, I think, really important because we talked about it in the last one, and we'll talk about it, I'm sure, all the way through. But presence and trust are so incredibly important because they are the catalyst for engagement for our students, for learning, engagement even with each other as educators, as collaborators, as colleagues. It's really the way we connect, whether it's in storytelling or like an emotional check-in, just real quickly saying, hey, how's everybody doing today? What's going on? You see, maybe pulling someone aside, you seem a little out of sorts today. Tell me about, are you doing okay? Those things, or even just being present, being with our students instead of putting myself, as sometimes I know I did, behind my desk, off to the side. You guys get to work instead of being present with them. That's where the engagement falls away. If I'm just separated from them, my presence isn't there, or they don't feel my presence, then it's hard for them to remain engaged.
Scott, that kind of reminds me of one of the stories that you shared in the book, and I wonder if you would just mention a little bit about it here. Um, One of the things that we like to think about as we build those relationships is how that builds agency in our students. And you had a great example of a personal story. Would you share a little bit about that?
Sure, it came, from you guys have read the story. It's me and my father. My dad was not a mechanic, but he would work on things because we didn't have a lot of money. So anyway, but when I was little, he would ask for help. And I know that was part of his desire for us to be together, but also for me to start learning some stuff. And sometimes it would be me holding the flashlight as he's looking to try to get up in there to the right hose or the right screw. Sometimes it's hand me this tool that I really didn't know anything about any of it. And right at the beginning, I would not hold the flashlight in the right place. I would grab the wrong wrench or whatever. And had he said, no, that's not, had he really come down on me, made it an unsafe place, I would have my mind would have been filled with, I'm certain, is just I'm bad at this. I'm dumb. I can't do this. I'd rather not help my dad. And I also would not have learned anything. As it was, because of his patience, because of the trust that we developed, I actually did learn how to anticipate what he would need next or to hold the light in the right place. I began to understand because, and I learned it without even thinking about it. I wasn't thinking about, oh, I'm learning about, being a mechanic. I was just in that relationship. I was learning how to be responsive in the right way, in a way that was helpful. And I think that's how learning happens and how we begin to have that agency where I say, I know how to do this. I can do this. I bet next time the car breaks down in that way, I bet I could do that. And suddenly it's not just about me helping, it's about me knowing I can do something.
Your dad was so far ahead of his time. So many parents I remember as a kid in our generation, there wasn't a lot of patience. There was, hey, hold that right. There wasn't a lot of gentleness.
And I'm certain he was very tempted to get frustrated with me multiple times. And he very rarely did that.
Yeah, that's so cool. I feel like the other piece of that is with our students is as they're developing that emotional intelligence, they learn how they're feeling, they become aware of their reactions and get better at regulating
Yes.
themselves and just behaviors improve. And when we know when we're more settled, that helps too. And so I think when students are in that place where they feel like they have agency, there's some control over their learning and their engagement in the classroom, it just helps a lot of those other areas as well.
Well, and that emotional regulation, whether it's the students being able to regulate their emotions or me as the teacher being able to regulate my emotions, all of that deepens that relational piece. Emotions are a big part of learning. I mean, and we want that to be there. We want them to feel empathy, to feel excitement, to feel sorrow when there's something to feel sorry about, when to feel even, read something historically on it. And it's okay for us to feel sad and bothered about something that shouldn't have happened. All of that is good and it helps the learning to be there. But the emotions that are not helpful are those unregulated emotions like fear of my teacher, fear of being wrong, anxiety about even being in this classroom. When we are emotionally regulated, as the teacher, when I'm able to help my students become that, the learning increases and the relationships develop into something that's very healthy for learning.
That actually reminds me of a little story I wanted to share about just the way that teachers are able to set a tone or that emotional side of our classrooms. I hadn't thought about this for a really long time, but I like to read the story because of Winn-Dixie with my students. And there's a part in the book where it talks about a litmus lozenge, and it's a little candy that tastes like sorrow. And I happened to get a little tin of litmus lozenges in a book order or something. They had them for teachers. And so I thought, I'm going to try something today. And when we were coming to that part of the book, and I said, I'm going to give you each a litmus lozenge. And when we get to this part in the book, I'm going to have you all taste it, go ahead and try it and see what happens. And so I'm reading the book and we get to that place and I said, okay, go ahead and taste your litmus lozenge. And I'm reading the book and it's talking about sorrow and it's talking about some sorrowful feelings these characters are having. And I get to the end of the chapter and I was pretty drawn into it myself, but I look up and I saw a couple students actually with tears.
Oh.
And I thought, oh my gosh, it went farther than I thought it would. I didn't want to make them sad, but we had a conversation then. And I said, so what's going on there? What are you feeling right now? And they were able to share how they were connecting with feelings of sorrow in their lives. And I thought, teachers have a lot of power in the classroom to set a tone.
Yeah.
And in this case, it was a very specific thing we were doing. But I think about other days where maybe I was impatient because something had gone wrong that morning and I wasn't as prepared as I wanted to be. And as you get to your classroom, teachers do a lot to set the tone and the culture of your room. And on those days, I know I didn't do that very well.
Yeah.
And I think that's something you need to just really be aware of, the strong, ability we have to really shape what our room feels like.
Yeah. Wonderful. Well, what we'd like to do, our big focus with these brief videos is to really launch you into your conversations. You have a lot to talk about. You may have done a lot of journaling, thought about those poems, thought about all the content in those 3 chapters, chapters 4, 5, and 6. And we're going to give you just a few about 3 questions that you can use or not use. They're designed to help you begin your time together in your conversation, in your circle. We want to make sure you remember to utilize the touchstones, give time for silence if needed, offer open, honest questions. But here are the 3 questions that we have that come out of these 3 chapters. First, how do I intentionally cultivate relational trust, agency, and emotional intelligence together, not separately? Sometimes maybe we think about those things as separately, but they really all work together. Are there ways that I structure things to help those go together? The second question, what classroom or staff practices reflect a relational approach to teaching and learning? Relational approach. And lastly, how do I sustain presence when the demands of teaching pull me in so many directions? And we all struggle with that, being pulled in different directions and having that, trying to be present for our students, for our colleagues, for ourselves. So we hope you'll have a wonderful circle time, and we look forward to chatting with you again in the next set of 3. Take care.